Thank you to everybody who has been waiting patiently for the last couple of hours for this to get underway. We promise we will not disappoint you. All right, so we have Nazarin Veronica. She was in the BBC documentary, or as I like to call it, Real World Vaccine Edition. And Ryan Cristiàn, who is of the Last American Vagabond, an independent journalist who's been covering vaccine-related COVID stuff, in my opinion, in more depth than anybody else out there. So I wanted to bring him on because the BBC presented this, I think, at the beginning as if it was an effort to try to understand why there are millions of people in the UK who chose not to get the COVID vaccine. And Nazarin was one of the people they chose to be in this. They put him in a house for 5 days. I thought that was a little weird. I'm not really sure why. Maybe you can explain to us why they wanted to do it that way. And this is Hannah Fry. She's a professor. Ryan, you looked her up in more depth than I did. What does she teach?
Oh, I don't have the information up in front of me anymore. I could grab the
That's
Wikipedia
okay.
page,
Nazarin,
but
do you
it was,
remember what she tell you? What she? I know she's written a bunch of articles on like cancer and.
Yeah, I don't think she teaches anything. I think she is a mathematician.
Okay. Yeah. They call her I know when I looked her up, I saw that she had done some other like medical reporting, I guess. Yeah. Okay. So I'm like, she's a public speaker and said she was a professor in mathematics of cities. So
I also found it quite interesting that she dabbled in stand-up comedy, did TED Talks. Of course, it was arguably that she said it was a year of saying yes to everything, but it seems that she's dabbled in a lot of different topics. I just thought that was an interesting point to include.
Okay. Yeah. And I mean, she sounds more like a public figure who maybe now focuses on science, not a scientist who has now gone into the public world. I don't know. I mean, maybe she's got a background in mathematics, as this one post I'm reading says, but that's her with the red hair. You're in the middle. And then Vicky, who was going to join us, is on the other side. She unfortunately had to cancel, but you two were kind of typecast as the troublemakers. I guess the first question I have for you is, what did they sell you on to get you to do this?
So they said it's going to be an opportunity to share our views about the COVID vaccine and explain why we haven't had it. So I just thought I hate the BBC. They've spread a lot of false information about, the pandemic throughout the whole, almost 3 years. So I can't stand them to begin with. But I was sort of debating, should I do it? Should I not? And then in the end, I decided to do it because I thought it's worth a try to at least be able to speak about the injuries and deaths from the, what. And yeah, actually, I did get to mention that, and they actually did leave that in, which I was very surprised by. I thought they were going to edit that bit out, but there are other things I said which I really wish they could have kept in, because I had stats to prove everything. I had science to prove everything. I had very, relevant questions for the experts. And I was able to ask them sometimes when they let me, but everything was cut out, which was relevant to me. All the parts where I proved my points were correct were cut out. All the parts where I proved their points were wrong were cut out as well. So they very craftily edited it to make it look like they were in the right and we were in the wrong.
One of the subscribers I have over on my locals community, AlisonMorrow.locals.com. If you're not there, you can post questions ahead of time for interviews, just so everybody's aware. And I have a couple coming in for you later, Nazarin. They were saying how they feel like when the legacy press, when these big name media organizations take on this topic, they often choose people who make statements that stereotype the people they're trying to understand. And so like they'll let somebody say, I think it's the mark of the beast, but they won't let somebody say this scientific paper shows blah, blah, blah. Right. And because those are like facts you could actually debate. And that that often it comes across as if the people who are making the choice not to get the vaccine are just total idiots. And she got that sense that they were doing that in this case. you know, in one question was like, were these people educated? Like, did they know what they were talking about, or was it edited? So you're saying that there were a lot of points based in science that were brought up that you all you made, but they just never made the cutting, or they dropped to the cutting room floor, I guess.
Yeah, I'm having a lot of comments currently telling me I'm an actress, telling me that I got paid to do this, telling me that, not just me, everyone who took part in it is having these messages. And I understand why, because when I watched it, it was completely different to how it was when we were filming. So everyone was bringing up very relevant questions. That was all cut out. They kept us there for 6 days, but the whole thing was only an hour long, and most of it was Hannah talking, actually, it seemed, the presenter. So they kept us there for 6 days, 5 days actually, for the filming, and then 1 additional day. So they had so much footage, and I think they did that purposefully to get those 15 minutes that they really wanted from us, the bits where we kind of slipped up or got tired and messed up or said something that probably you shouldn't say on a BBC documentary, and they kept those bits in, and I think that was very clever. It's a very clever tactic to get what you want out of people, keep them there till they're literally so tired and so over it, and then they get upset or get angry and because they're not being heard. And yeah, that's probably why you watched it and you kind of felt that people were not sounding as clever as you wish they did, because that's what they chose to keep in, sadly. I really wish they did it fairly and they picked the good bits where we had very relevant points, and actually more relevant points than they did, but they didn't, sadly. So yeah.
Yeah, I think if I could add a point real quick, Allison, if that's okay.
Yeah.
The BBC has a very clear history of misrepresenting the people they have on their programs. I mean, you can speak to Eva Bartlett, Vanessa Beeley, and plenty of others who have documented this in real time, shown the versions, what they said and what was cut out and so on. And to your point earlier, Allison, I would argue it makes a lot of sense now why they would want people in the house and to get you to get you comfortable. Right. So you're in this period of time where you're not in the interview, but you're more so a 5-day period where you're just kind of relaxing and and then you end up saying things that you may actually believe and maybe are true, but are not rooted in the scientific evidence that make it seem valid. And there's a lot of those points out there that said without the backing of the science and the corporate discussion seems ridiculous because of the way they present it. So it makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess I could see that now. And you're right. You don't know when the interviews, because the interview is the whole time, you're maybe thinking because the cameras aren't there or whatever, that they're not gathering intel on you, and you start to maybe, I don't know, in your case, Nazarin, if this happened, but were there people that just felt like, oh yeah, I really like Hannah. She's not going to do us dirty. We trust her now. We've been in a house with her for 4 or 5 days. We don't have to watch what we say. Do you feel like that was part of it?
Yeah, I feel like myself and Vicky were both very careful the whole time. And that's why they couldn't really make us look stupid, because everything we said, we thought about it before, and we thought, how can this impact badly on us? Like, how can they use this to their advantage? Is there a way that they can edit it to make me look stupid if I say this? Or yeah, it was a lot of thinking went into it. That's why I think I was so exhausted throughout the entire thing, because I had to think constantly, and so did Vicky. The others, I would say, didn't really go into it with the same mindset as we did. Myself and Vicky both knew that we were going to be duped. We went into it fully planning everything, planning exactly what we were going to say, and yeah, that's probably why we kind of came across as more, normal, and then the others were edited to look, everyone's sort of targeting these actor comments on the other people, not as much myself and Vicky, although I'm getting a few and so is she, but not as many as the others. So I guess it did come across that way, that they weren't as, that their reasons weren't as normal as ours were. So yeah, I think the way to go into it is just be very careful. And I'm afraid they weren't as careful as we were. And they kind of did sort of trust Hannah more, I think. They saw her as a friend sometimes. They were very chatty, whereas myself and Vicky were both very like, we wanted to stay as far as possible from her. So yeah, I don't know.
Okay, before we cut the stream on YouTube, which just everybody on YouTube, you should know we're bailing and we're gonna go talk in depth about all the stuff. Like you were bringing up the science that you presented as to why you made your decision not to get the vaccine, and so we want to talk about the science, but YouTube doesn't like talking about science, so we can't talk about it here. So we're live on Rumble and ROKFIN right now. The links are all in the description. It'll be up in full too on ODYSEE and locals later, but we're just not gonna stay on YouTube because why? Everybody needs to go move over to the other platform. So this is your warning. In about a couple minutes, we're going to totally cut it. I think other than that, the science that you presented, did you feel like there was any other way that you were made to look uncharacteristic of who you really are? Was it, because you and Vicky are kind of typecast as, like I said, as the troublemakers of the group. Do you feel like they made you look different than your personality really was over the course of the couple of days? Just curious how you thought that role was developed.
Yes, definitely. I mean, it's not really, basically they didn't allow us to speak freely. When we made points which were too relevant for them to deal with, they, either told us to stop talking about that because we'll come to it later, which we never did. Or if I was, for example, questioning the experts too much, they'd tell me to stop. There was one expert who was a GP doctor, and she couldn't answer my questions. As a GP, I thought that was kind of crazy that she wasn't able to answer those questions. And then they kind of took her out of the room and they wouldn't allow me to speak to her after that. I don't know why. I didn't think I was attacking her. I thought I was just asking a few questions, which were, yeah, like I said, too relevant for her. But yeah, so of course we're going to be angry if we're not allowed to speak freely. So we did sometimes kick off and, get angry or walk away. There were times where Vicky walked out of the room because she couldn't handle it. And then they cut out the reasons showing why she walked out of the room, and then just had her walking out for no reason, because she's crazy and too emotional and overly angry at things. So it kind of makes us look, aggressive and rude, whereas we're not actually that at all. If we had a fair chance to speak, we would have come across very well. Then they had a bit of me. They cut to I think the fact check guy, Will Moy. He was talking, and they cut to a bit of me rolling my eyes as he was talking. I can't remember exactly the bit they used, but the part that they used of me rolling my eyes was not at the part they put it in.
Of course.
So it looked like I was rolling my eyes, like to be rude, whereas actually the reason I rolled my eyes is because I was being told to shut up every 2 seconds. So I was upset that they weren't allowing me to speak freely, and I rolled my eyes, but they used that to make me look like a rude person, which I'm definitely not. And anyone who watches that, who knows me, will know that I did not roll my eyes for that reason. So it's kind of obvious. I mean, I had people who didn't even know me telling me they could tell it was heavily edited. So
that's really interesting. I mean, I guess I should have assumed that they would do stuff like that, where they would just take I just can't believe the ethics of that anyone would think that that's okay to put your reaction to an event that it was not a reaction to. That's super deceptive. I mean, that's intentional deception. Brian, any other thoughts before we go?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen this throughout the entire COVID-19, the whole event, and that the problem here is that they have clearly already decided what you were before you came on this show. There was no effort to engage and actually understand your perspective, which is what they sold it as to you, right? And instead they just made, and this is the point, Allison, is whether they don't care about their ethics, which I think is actually part of what based on their historical coverage of things like this or before, or they've made the decision in their minds that because they know what you are and what you think and that it's already wrong, that it's okay to do that. That's what I call lying for their truth, right? They've believed that you're wrong, so we can edit that because she'd probably roll her eyes otherwise. That's the justification. And that's my opinion. I can't prove that's how they thought. But either way, I think it's obvious that they dishonestly misrepresented what you thought and what you believed for their own perspective. That's not journalism. That's propaganda.
Okay, I do have one last quick question before we cut the YouTube stream. When did it become obvious that it wasn't just about their listening to you, but about trying to get you to listen to them and change your mind about the vaccine? Because, at first, like I said, I was kind of, okay, maybe this is a real effort to try to understand people. But it seemed like this, they were pitching it as like a listening session, but there was so much, like you said, Hannah does so much talking in the final piece. I don't know if that's the way it was the whole time you were there, or if we just got a fast track version, but it seemed like it very quickly became, an altar call for the vaccine. I'm just curious when that really happened in real time.
So when we were there, it wasn't really her trying to, okay, how do I explain this? So we were kind of allowed to say what we believed. We did have good discussions where we did kind of get something out of it, and we were actually able to show her our science and maybe even make her think differently about it. But I kind of noticed it was going to be, the whole point of it was going to be to change our minds before I went on. So I was told that we were going to be asked if we wanted to get the COVID vaccine before, I think a day or two before I went on for the filming. So they told us that very late. And if I'd have known that earlier, I probably would have said no to going on it, because it kind of makes it clear that that's going to be the purpose of the show. At the end, they're going to ask us if we want to get it. Have we changed our minds? Mm-hmm. Why are you trying to change our minds in the first place? You didn't say that was going to be the point of the show. So I noticed that before going on, a few days before going on.
Okay, well, that makes sense. Everybody, Ryan has a new puppy, just like I have a toddler, so we may be switching who's hosting the show. All right, well, thanks. If you're watching on YouTube, this is where it ends. It's been real. We hope you see you on ROKFIN and Rumble. Don't forget, you can join my editorial board over on Locals, AlisonMorrow.locals.com.